Hey, welcome back to our biology lectures on Unit 2. This is on our Learning Target 2.1, which is all about cells, animal and plant cells. Just to quickly go over to summarize the different learning targets for this unit, we're going to talk about plant and animal cells, and then organelles of the cell, cell membranes, viruses and bacteria structures, and then viruses versus bacteria function. And all of this, the whole point of this whole unit is how we keep our spaceship disease free. So before we can learn about viruses and bacteria, we need to understand a little bit about cells. So at the beginning, we're going to learn about plant and animal cells and then the parts of the cells, and then we're really going to get into what makes viruses and bacteria different and how can we stop them from taking over our ship, say that like a bacteria or a virus starts to spread. So this is very relevant today as we know about Ebola, but also it's very important for our ship if we're going to make it last. It can't have diseases in it. So our first learning target is plant and animal cells. We want to compare and contrast plant and animal cells. So before we get into the differences between those two types of cells, we first need to know a little bit about what's called cell theory. So cell theory is this idea that everything is made of, or all living things are made of cells. There are three tenets, or we could say main ideas. So tenets are just like these ideas that are very important. So there's three things that we need to know about cell theory. And the first is that all living things are composed of cells. So it doesn't matter if you're an amoeba or a kangaroo or a tree or a cucumber, you are made of cells. Humans are made of cells. Everything that's alive is made of cells. So that's the first idea behind cell theory. The second tenet or main idea is that cells are the most basic units of life. So if we can even take something as complicated as a human being, if we break us down to our smallest pieces, the most basic unit of our life is these different cells. So we have all different types of cells, right? We have brain cells, fat cells, heart cells, blood cells, nerve cells, but every single piece is made of cells. So cells are the most basic units of life. And finally, cells must come from pre-existing cells. So this idea that cells don't just come from anywhere, they have to start from somewhere. So these two cells, for example, if we trace back, had to originally start from another cell. So cells make more cells. They do not appear randomly. They must be made from other living cells. So this is actually a big thing in science because scientists have not been able to create new cells without using other cells first. So basically what that's saying is scientists have not been able to create new life. There should be a 3 here. So they have not been able to create new life. They've had to make other cells by taking existing cells already, and that's actually a main idea behind cell theory. Okay, so now we got to get into a little bit about what cells do. So just like living things, cells are living things. So cells must grow and develop. They must obtain and use energy. So they grow and develop. They must obtain and use energy. So this is a cell eating something, basically absorbing energy from something else. They must reproduce, so we start with one cell, and then that doubles, and then that doubles, and that doubles. And so one cell can turn into 2 to 4 to 8 pretty quickly. And they must adapt and respond to their environment. So we have here some nerve cells that are responding to stimulus, and so they are sending electrical impulses because they're responding to their environment. Alright, so now let's get into the differences between plant cells and animal cells. Plant cells are what are called photosynthetic, which means they create their own energy from sunlight. So photo means sun or light, and synthetic means to make. So they make their own energy from sun, from light. So this is a picture of a plant cell. It's a little bit blurry, but you can kind of see the different parts of the plant cell. There's the wall, there's a vacuole, and we're going to get into those differences. But the first thing you need to know is that plant cells are photosynthetic. Okay, so let's talk about the differences now. First of all, plant cells have a cell wall. meaning there's a strong, rigid structure on the outside of the cell. Secondly, they have chloroplasts. So these are chloroplasts, and that's actually what makes plants green, is these chloroplasts. And they create sugar from CO2 and sunlight. So they take carbon dioxide and sunlight and they turn it into sugar. All right, and lastly, a large vacuole to hold water. So we know that water is very important to plants, just like it is to humans. But plants have a way of storing this water in something called a vacuole. And it's usually pretty big, and it's what makes a plant what's called turgid, which means that it fills up that plant cell. If this vacuole's empty, the plant cell becomes dry and withered, and you've probably seen this before. If you forget to water your plants, it'll dry out and crumple up, and that's because its vacuoles have become empty. So, animal cells are heterotrophic. So this is another big word. It's like photosynthetic. What this means is that it needs other things. So hetero means other, and trophic to eat. So it needs to eat from other things. So it does not make its energy from the sun. It cannot make its energy on its own. They need other things for energy. All right. So they need to eat or obtain energy from another source. So let's get into what makes animal cells look different. Well, first of all, they don't have cell walls. They still have a membrane. It's called a plasma membrane, and we're going to learn about that in 2.3. But they do not have chloroplasts. So there's no chloroplasts because they can't make, they can't do photosynthesis. They can't make their own energy. So you'll not see chloroplasts in animal cells. And lastly, they do actually have some things that are like vacuoles, but they're much, much smaller. So they don't get really big. They don't expand when they get filled up with water. Okay, and that's actually it. So that's the differences between animal and plant cells. And we've talked about basically what cells are in general and the basic idea of cell theory. So we need to understand everything that needs to be true for a cell, and the differences between animal and plant cells. And when we get into our next learning target, that's when we're going to be looking at all the different pieces, all the different organelles inside of the cells. All right, good luck. Talk to you soon.